foolish mortals.
Hello there. Are you insane? Get out of here!
Remain seated with your seatbelt fastened.
Right, off you go.
Welcome to Average Joe Orlando. Hello, theme park goers. Welcome to another one of Joe's Deep Dive. Today we're going to be exploring Halloween Horror Nights Orlando icons. So for those of you who don't know, the icon kind of ties the event together. So Halloween Horror Nights, as I've mentioned here many times in the podcast, one of my favorite events in Orlando all year. One of my favorite events just in general all year. It's grown bigger and bigger every year. I've done episodes now on it. And the icons really is what, are what they tie it together. So the icon oversees everything. And I like doing these deep dives because I get to do some research and learn something as well. So for me, this was a fun one to kind of do a little more research, as my first year for Halloween Horror Nights was HHN 21, and that was in 2012? Yes. No. 2011. It used to actually go everything in order too. So 22 was 12 and everything was kind of in order. So this year, since it's 2024 at the time of the recording, it should have been 34. However, COVID unfortunately messed that up because it would have been 2020, would have been the 30th because it started in 1990. Okay, that's a lot of math. Anyway, completely irreverent. But they've done many years since I started going in for HHN 2021 where they haven't had icons. And you kind of feel the events are kind of losing a little bit of the continuity between everything. And it's fun because certain years when they have it, it kind of ties everything together, brings storylines together, has an overall theme for the year, which is really fun. And it kind of brings everything more to a whole theme for the event. Also helps with the merchandise as well to have everything together. So I'm going to be talking about everything from the first to the current Sinister and Surreal for this one at Halloween Horror Nights 33 icons, some of their backstories, where we've seen them, and then when we've seen them again, because it's fun. A lot of the Horror Nights icons we've seen more than once as well. Of course, it's a deep dive, so I love ending with some fun facts too about some icons that kind of never came to be also, and ones that we've kind of seen. The fun thing is, the more you learn about the icons and more you learn about the event is the more you learn about the lore and the storylines and the repeat. So if you've only been to Halloween Horror Nights once, you might not understand why is this place taking place in Cary, Ohio, or who is this character that people are excited about, or why is there always a bear in the house, or all these different things, and what is a little boo? So there's a lot of fun little things, having Cary, Ohio being a setting that has followed to different locations throughout. They always have the bear in a house every year. It's kind of one of the things they always put in there. Little Boo was a pumpkin for one of the houses one year that was carved out and became such a fan favorite that they made it into more of an icon that goes along every year and that has its own merchandise, kind of like Earl the Squirrel for Christmas, which we will get into as the holidays come around. But there is just a fun lore, and the creatives have so much fun with the characters and the icons and the storyline and bringing back different stories and repeating certain things that it's fun for the fans, like me, to kind of look for it every year. And you go through and you start looking, oh, what is here? Oh, what is this one from for instance, this year is Slaughter Cinema 2 is one of the houses. So it's fun watching some throwbacks to other houses, some throwbacks to things going on. It's at the Cary Drive-In, St. Cary again. So a lot of really fun things going on. But that all really stems from, to me at least, the icons. So let's deep dive into the Halloween Horror Nights icons. Now, Halloween Horror Nights started in 1990, as I mentioned, and the first one was called Fright Nights, and it was only a few nights, and it kind of just featured Beetlejuice a lot. Not really an icon, kind of just ringmaster for it. The first icon that would be official in my research appeared in Halloween Horror Nights 5 and then again at 6 would be the Crypt Keeper. And this is an interesting icon just because he is not an original character. He's a character they used. So that's kind of an interesting one to kind of talk about, the Crypt Keeper, because the Crypt Keeper comes from the show Tales from the Crypt back in the day. Which apparently was a comic. I'm doing some research, reading off my notes as I go through here as well. But he appeared twice. He had House as well, also featured over at Universal Hollywood, and then appeared again later as well, which we'll talk about later in some of the scare zones as well. Love saying as well on here. But it's kind of fun to see that they started with an icon before they really can get into their own creativity. So they brought in the Crypt Keeper from the show as an icon to kind of test it out, but we didn't see an original icon to Halloween Horror Nights 10, which is really interesting that they took so long to kind of get their own footing and kind of figure it out. And this is when kind of the story begins with everything. So Halloween Horror Nights 10 featured Jack the Clown for the first time. And if you've been to Halloween Horror Nights, you've definitely heard of Jack because he is, to me, the main icon that is associated with Halloween Horror Nights. So he has also the biggest backstory as well, and also kind of goes into a lot of the other characters. So to me, Jack is more of the ringleader of all the different characters and the icons that you have seen. And then also, more recently, last year, had Dr. Oddfellow as the icon, which really tied back to Jack as well. So let me read you a little bit about Jack. So Jack, his name is really Jack Schmidt, and he was for Halloween Horror Nights, and he's the first original icon. And then he appeared actually at Orlando, Hollywood, and Singapore as well. And now also, so he is a clown, so that's also creepy in general, which is kind of fun that they made a clown scary, and I'm sure clowns hate that, professional clowns at least. So he's a killer clown with a huge ego and considers himself a star performer. So he's really loud, he's boisterous, he brings in a big show element to it to kind of torture different people on stage. There is a brother character that we'll talk about in a little bit, but then he also spawned off, I guess his girlfriend, Chance, who became an icon later on, and then that's his female clown partner, and she's very much like a Harley Quinn, which we will talk about too. But he'll have his backstories and his own little storylines. He'll have his big shows, his own house. He'll have his own scare zone. So Jack became really the face of what you have seen. He's a creepy clown too, kind of disgusting, and really good icon. To me, he's one of the favorites. The only problem is with Jack, in my opinion, is he has been used so much in the past that it kind of seems like he's a crutch. So he started with Halloween Horror Nights 10, and then came back for 11, and then 16, when they all came back for the Sweet 16 year, was when all the icons of the time came back. 17, and then it seems like every time there's a big year, it's Jack again. So it's always, you don't know Jack, and here's the 20th year, it's Jack. 25, Jack. 30, Jack. So it'll be interesting to see with next year being 35 if we don't know Jack again. The next icon that came in Halloween Horror Nights 12, so after 2 years of having Jack, would be the Caretaker. So the Caretaker is super creepy. He came in for really cool Halloween Horror Nights, which I wish I was here for, but it was in Islands of Fear, so Islands of Adventure had Halloween Horror Nights that year, which must have been so cool to see it over there. He walks around with a pair of shears, and he is, if you watch old videos, he comes around in a carriage as well, like driving around. His name is Dr. Albert Kane, and he's the caretaker of Shady Oaks Cemetery. And Shady Oaks gets a lot of names throughout different things. You'll see Shady Oaks used at different houses or streets as well. So one of those fun ones that they always like to throw around. And he's creepy, and he always wants to go around kind of killing people because, you know, that's what they do. Now, the Caretaker, when he's not performing surgeries or experiments on people, he'll obviously goes into hibernation like the other characters, and we don't see them. However, last time we did see him was for the 20th. So first time was 12th, Sweet 16, which I wish I was here for, and then the 20th he came back for as well. Next up would be the Director. So the Director first appeared at Halloween Horror Nights 13. He also came back for Sweet 16 and the 20th as well as an icon. And the Director has a really fun storyline too, just like them all. To me, this is the one that I understand the most and will go into detail the most. But he was a director in Hollywood, and he would want to make these crazy horror films. However, the studios didn't want him to make these, so he wanted to make them as realistic as possible. So during these scenes, he would actually kill and torture people while filming his scenes. So I remember going to Halloween Horror Nights 30, I think it was, when they all had up Scare Zone, and he had a whole bathtub scene where he's pretending to film, and he's this creepy guy, and he's trying to make these films, but he's trying to make them as real as possible, so he's directing them in a way where he's actually killing them, which is pretty fun. Yeah, super fun. We love that. Storyteller is the next one. She appeared at Halloween Horror Nights 15, and then, of course, 16 and 20, as I mentioned with the other ones. And the Storyteller is creepy. She's a little old lady who sits down and tells you a story, and then goes crazy. Well, ironically, the Storyteller's story is a little muddy. Overall, you see her in different times where she's just a sweet old lady in a rocking chair reading a book, but then comes and attacks, and then you get sucked into the book, I believe. Yeah, so she has a whole backstory where she's just this creepy little old lady that ties into the stories that come to life. The same year that they rolled out the Storyteller, there was also the Terror Queen, who did come back recently for a Scare Zone. And the Terror Queen has a backstory as well. A lot of people really don't remember the Terror Queen. I find she's more of a looked over icon. You always think of the director, Storyteller, the Usher, which we'll get to, and Jack and Chance. But the Terror Queen's kind of a lesser known character. And she is looks like a kind of a tree kind of is coming out of her head, and she doesn't speak, kind of just makes different movements with her body in the woods. And so she's the storyline says she's always present with the ceremony of blood was going underway, and she concludes every ritual with a sacrifice of pure blood. So she's in charge of taking over everything, and everybody has to worship and follow her every command. So I guess she's like a woodsy cult leader. That's fun. Sure. Now, Halloween Horror Nights 18 introduced Bloody Mary. And if you ever see any of the commercials on YouTube, it's always somebody looking in the mirror and then saying her name 3 times and her coming to life. So she was a character that was used that year as the icon. However, one that really wasn't spoken about again after that year, and then also didn't really see as much anymore that year. But Bloody Mary was a creepy character used for Halloween Horror Nights 18. The next one will be the Usher for Halloween Horror Nights 19, and then came back in the year 20. The Usher walks around. He has this movie Usher costume on, which very much looks like the Tower of Terror, and he always walks around with his flashlight and goes, shh, and you're like, okay. But then he ends up killing people then. So it's always a movie theater kind of theme with the Usher, and him just telling everybody to shush, and then you assume basically killing them with his flashlight. He's a fun character just because he kind of comes off creepy and eerie, but then also quiet and kind of unsuspecting, kind of like the Storyteller. So the Usher's been a fan favorite for years. So Halloween Horror Nights 20, a big icon year, needed a big icon. So they created Fear to be the icon that year. And it's very interesting because Fear is somebody that nobody can really picture or talk about or kind of really know much about, because it seems like one that kind of just didn't really take off and then never really gets seen again. But they tried to tie everything together. So the quote is, "For the past 19 years, he's been the master behind every frightened scream. Every ghoulish creature, every monstrous cruelty at Halloween Horror Nights have all been under his command for now. Now, for the first time ever, he emerges from the shadows to finally take ultimate control and reign over all his created once and for all." And the whole idea for Fear was that he had a lantern that he walked around with, which had all of the other icons in it, and he was in control of all the different icons that we've seen throughout the past few years. And that was kind of the fun part about having Fear, was that he would talk about the previous icons. So he would talk about Jack, and then that would represent chaos, the caretaker for death, the director for sacrifice, the storyteller for legend, the usher for vengeance. And the past 19 years were just the beginning and kind of building up to Fear. They would also talk about the event's icon, and then Fear would go back into his prison and then wait to be released again. And then he was trapped and he'd be coming back out. But it was very interesting because you never really talked about Fear again. You did see him again in one of the houses later on, which we'll talk about, but he was kind of one of those that, let's tie everything together of the previous years, which is interesting when I get to this year's Sinister and Surreal. Kind of has a similar storyline, and also has a similar lackluster payoff, in my opinion, at least. So it's kind of funny looking at how they tried to tell this character story that ties everything together. Like, look at us, what's to blame for what you've been through? But then you kind of just go, well, where's Jack? Where's the other iconic characters? So it seems like they don't seem to work as much. Speaking of characters that don't work as much, Lady Luck. So Lady Luck was the first one that I was introduced to. So of course to me, I'm like, this is cool. Kind of one of the weakest characters, if you ask me. Lady Luck started for Halloween Horror Nights 21, so the whole idea was 21, was gambling that time, even though I believe you can gamble when you're 18. So I guess a creepy bartender probably wouldn't have worked. So sure, let's go with gambling. But Lady Luck is about your fate and kind of gambling with fate and making a choice. And it's this creepy woman that is in front of kind of a roulette kind of wheel in your way, all about your luck. And about the whole theme is Lady Luck, your luck has run out. I remember they had a scare zone with her that year that also was a bunch of different ones of Lady Luck. She never really got used again or spoken about again. She was kind of a one and done. You would see her when they would bring back like big icons, but it would be like different themes of gambling. So kind of a lackluster character, unfortunately. Another one that they don't really talk about as much for some reason is in Halloween Horror Nights 22, and I don't have much information on this one either, is the Iniquus, which is a tall skeleton on stilts. Kind of one that they didn't really like promote as, hey, this is the big icon this year. Just kind of was a there character. As I mentioned earlier, after 2022, there was kind of a gap in characters. That's really when they did, if you remember, The Walking Dead was very big then. And it was basically all walkers took over the park. Everything was Walking Dead, blah. Kind of some dark years for Halloween Horror Nights, of a little bit of slower times. They also had the 1 year where they had the roaming hordes, where basically there wasn't streets. It was just the streets would randomly appear. So they kind of got their groove back later on with Halloween Horror Nights 25 when they brought back Jack. And that's when they introduced Chance as his sidekick, the Harley Quinn type character. And then Chance got her own event the following year. So Halloween Horror Nights 26 was Chance's year, where basically she now took over and she became the main icon. So she went from being a small character on the sidelines to having her own event for Halloween Horror Nights 26. Now that year also Chance did have her own house, which wasn't that great. Overall, Chance wasn't super well received. Her high-pitched voice and giggling was a little bit more annoying, and it was more like, okay, maybe you should stay on the side. And the whole thing was, you don't stand a chance was her theme. So we were okay being like, okay, Jack and Chance. She kind of worked better as a duo, in my opinion, not on her own. Now, once again, we did go a while without seeing an icon for a few years, which, once again, like I said, kind of ties the event together. Until Halloween Horror Nights 30, they brought back Jack. And then for 31 was the first time since Halloween Horror Nights 26 where we got a newer icon to take over, and that was the Pumpkin Lord. And this was a really fun character. Now, the Pumpkin Lord started in the house the year prior as a main character in, was it Pumpkin Guts? It was one of my favorite houses. I'm going to have to look it up. It was one of my favorite houses. Wicked Growth, Seeds of Extinction. Wicked Growth introduced him, and it was this really cool house where the pumpkin would take over the house, and at the end you went into the pumpkin's lair, and there was the Pumpkin Lord, and he was this cool character they created for this house. Well, the next year he became the icon for the event, and he had this giant pumpkin as soon as you walked into Halloween Horror Nights, where the minions kind of sit now, and he would welcome you in and burp, and it was just this cool event. So it was fun to have the Pumpkin Lord tie in for 31. Also, the theme for 31 was Halloween every day, or it's always Halloween because it was the 31st. Halloween's the 31st. So it was very classic Halloween, old school Halloween, traditional Halloween. So having a Pumpkin Lord in that one was a really fun way to tie that together. The following year, Halloween Horror Nights 32, we got a brand new character as well, Dr. Oddfellow. And this was a great character because they really tied him into the event. And this was, to me, the most cohesive year that I've ever been to. Now, Dr. Oddfellow's storyline is very deep, but I won't go into the entire thing. However, each scare zone had a Dr. Oddfellow from that year and kind of explained part of his backstory. So if you went through the jungle part, you got to see how Dr. Oddfellow got his power, and they had an actor playing out when he found the skull that gave him this immortal life power. And then you'd go through the Vampire 60s one, and he was one of the vampires there attending that Woodstock festival. So in each of the scare zones, he was somewhere. There was a whole shipping yard one where he was getting the thing shipped over. So each one had a little tie-in that kind of told his story throughout his life. And it all concluded with him running this circus where the clown that worked at the circus was Jack Smith, which we know is Jack the Clown. So it was more of a prequel character that kind of gave birth to Jack, and there was a whole storyline where they had this fight, and something happens where Jack battles Dr. Oddfellow to get his power for that internal life that he takes in his cane. But Dr. Oddfellow was fun because it's the first time we really got a prequel character that tied into another major character and had this big cohesive storyline throughout the entire event. So the entire event had great merchandise, had great theming, everything tied back to Dr. Oddfellow, and it really kind of made the event feel very holistic, which is something that we didn't really have in a long time, which made Halloween Horror Nights 32, to me, one of the greatest years that we had yet. And that leaves us with today, Halloween Horror Nights 33. So that introduced two characters. So we have two icons for Halloween Horror Nights 33. And very interesting characters, Sinister and Surreal. And they did each of the E's in their name as a 3 for 33. So they are some new stories, and I'm going to read through them because I'm not as familiar since they are newer. I did already go to the event and get to see them. Not as cohesive as last year, and to me not as exciting of characters. You're kind of like, what are they and what is happening? When Dr. Oddfellow was a clear character with a clear storyline, easier to follow, these are more hidden within scare zones. But the whole theme is that for 33 years, the screams of thousands of eager Halloween Horror Nights guests have been collected within the shadowy depths of Universal Orlando Resort. With each year that went by came a new set of frights for our guests to indulge, which reminds me a lot of Halloween Horror Nights 20 with Fear. That let's just tie in all the previous years. So all while their walls of terror festered beneath the billowing fog of the surface, forming a monstrous manifestation of horror that lives within their hearts, an evil overgrowth that would spread in its hellish grasp throughout the crevice of the park's underbelly. Who wrote this? Anyway, so there's supposed to be two distinct realms. The whole idea is that Sinister and Surreal, one's pain and the other one's psychological torment. And it sounds good on paper that, okay, there's two of them, and then there's a duality of fear scare zone when you walk in the park, and if you go one way, you get to the torture fair, which features one of them, the other one's the Demon Queen. However, how it's played out in the park is more, this one's red, this one's blue. You go this way, and it's the blue scare zone with one of them. You go this way, and it's the other one. And it's not as cohesive. There's no storyline outside of these two ones. It's fine. I don't foresee them being major icons in the future, and I don't foresee them being as memorable as, let's say, Dr. Oddfellow or Jack or maybe the director. They're more of just interesting ones that they picked for 33. Also interesting that they decided to tie everything together for 33, so to be curious for 35 what the overall theme is and what happens there. Now, I'd like to always end the episodes with fun facts, and I have some really cool fun facts about some characters that have never happened, but kind of did happen. So for the year 2001, there was a character named Eddie Schmidt, who is Jack's brother, and he was supposed to come out with a chainsaw, had that thing kind of like Hannibal Lecter has over his mouth, and would come out with his chainsaw all bloody. However, after the attacks on 9/11, they decided to kind of cut back on the blood and gore that year and kind of scrapped him. He was used later on for houses and zones for Halloween Horror Nights 30, and you kind of saw him around, but he never became official icon for Halloween Horror Nights in 2001, just because they wanted to kind of reduce that blood and gore. There's also a character named Cindy Kane, who was supposed to be out for Halloween Horror Nights 12, and she was this little girl, super creepy. However, she was scrapped, and they said there was a sting of child abductions at the time, and then got replaced by the caretaker, but then they later worked her in kind of as his daughter, and then she would make appearances in houses and scare zones throughout different events. But they pulled her, similar to Eddie, as a main character and kind of gave a subplot more for the fans. Also, for Halloween Horror Nights 25, there was a scare zone just with all the icons where you could see, and there was also a house that year where Jack presents 25 Years of Monsters and Mayhem, where you got to see all your favorites. And also, for Halloween Horror Nights 30, also featuring Jack, there was Halloween Horror Nights Icons Captured, and you got to see all of the icons in that house, and that was really fun too, because you got to see everybody that you haven't seen in years, and the ending would always change, and there would be a different one on the throne. So every time that you went through, one of the icons were one of the main featured in there too. So that was kind of a brief, under 30-minute description of all the icons that we've ever seen. It's going to be interesting to see where they go with this, if they continue doing icons that they have in the past few years, or if they kind of just go back to Jack for the 35th, maybe the 34, take a break. But either way, kind of ties the stories together for the event and makes the event even better than it already is. Well, with that, I will see you in the fog. Thanks for taking a ride with Average Joe Orlando.
You made it!
I knew you would. Is everyone okay? Hope you still want to open an account.
Say cheese! See you later!
Thanks, everybody. You were brilliant.
At this time, gather up your personal belongings and take your small grubs by their grubby little hands as you exit. Thank you.